All right, this is second grade module 7, lesson 16. And in this lesson, students are just going to be going all over the place, measuring a bunch of things. But they're going to add a little bit of strategy involved here because we want students to be thinking prior to the measuring something, am I going to use inches to measure this, or feet to measure this, or yards to measure this? And this lesson really kind of ties into that concept of a story of units. When I measure something, are my units going to be inches, feet, or yards? Let's think prior to the measuring what makes sense. And that's really kind of a cool thing, cool skill for our second graders to have. So let's get started.
So ostensibly in the class time during the concept development, students have been developing a lot of experience measuring a whole variety of things from small things like paper clips and crayons, in which case they'd be using inches, to slightly larger things where perhaps the width of their desk or maybe the length of a book or something like that, to really long things like the length of a wall or the height of a door. And so we want students to really develop that experience measuring things so that when they get home, and that's what this is now, they can rely on that experience and not really have to like do it first, measure it first, and then think, should I have used my inches, feet, or yards? So what's the height of the door? And again, parents and teachers, man, there are some answers, particularly when we're talking about feet or yards, that it could go either way. For example, the height of a door. Well, you could measure the height of a door in feet. You could also measure it in yards, because it could be a particularly tall door. You might say, oh, it's about 2.5 yards or 3 yards. Definitely length of your street. Okay, that's going to be yards. That's probably less gray area. But the height of a door, man, if some students say feet and other students say yards, don't argue, because there really is choice involved. And really, if you think about it, when I go to the Home Depot or Lowe's or something, like a hardware store, when you purchase doors, you actually purchase them in inches. Doors are listed in inches. So, man, on that one measurement, it could go either way. Just let your students just develop the experience of measuring things. Whether they have the correct answer or not totally takes a secondary. It's of secondary importance, right? So things like, oh, pencils, you'll probably measure it in inches. Length of a car, well, you probably measure it in feet. The paintbrush, oh, you might measure it in inches. What's a textbook? Oh, you might measure it in inches. There's just a variety of answers available on this page. Now here, again, this less gray area, now we really want students to be thinking critically. The height of a flagpole is more, less, or about the same as the length of a yardstick. So we definitely want students to understand that the height of a flagpole is probably more than, unless it's an unusually small flagpole, is probably more than the length of a yardstick. And the width of a door is more, less, or about the same as the length of a yard. Oh, that's about the same if you think about that yardstick. The length of a laptop computer, is that more, less, or about the same as a 12-inch ruler? It kind of obviously it depends on the length of the computer itself. But also, here's another thing, parents and teachers. Hey, some kids don't have a lot of experience with laptop computers, particularly children of poverty. So we may have some life experience issues. I remember one day my daughter was told to write a story about how to build a snowman. Well, my daughter had never seen the snow. She was in second grade, had never been in the snow, so she didn't know how to make a snowman. So parents and teachers, you may be dealing with some of these things where students don't really know about a laptop computer because they don't have one. So take that into consideration as they're working on these problems. This and the next slide are just opportunities for your students to have choice and take ownership of the mathematics. In this case, they're going to name 3 objects, and they're going to decide, well, what kind of measurement tool would they use? I would use a ruler to measure the length of this thing, or I would use a yardstick to measure the length of the thing, or I would use inches to measure this object. It's just a great opportunity to give your students choice. And this, now they're going to be naming objects at home to do the exact same kind of thing. Really, research shows if we want students to understand measurement, really what we need students to do is just measure a whole ton of stuff. So give your students plenty of opportunity to measure a variety of objects and then talk about it over here. And that wraps up 2nd grade, Module 7, Lesson 16. Students are just measuring and measuring and measuring and measuring using inches, feet, and yardsticks.